Right now, somewhere on this planet, billions in gold, jewels, and sacred relics are quietly hiding from humanity. A sword pulled from stone, a room made of pure amber, an emperor's tomb nobody can find. 44 of history's most absurd, most expensive, and most stubborn missing treasures all in one place. Some vanished yesterday. Some have been gone for thousands of years. 1. 6 tons of glowing amber, panels of gold leaf, mosaics, mirrors. Gifted to Peter the Great in 1716 as the world's most ridiculous diplomatic flex, the Amber Room sparkled inside Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg for 2 centuries. Then the Nazis arrived in 1941, decided pretty things belonged to them, peeled the entire room off the walls, and shipped it to Königsberg Castle. By the end of 1945, the room had simply evaporated. Salt mines, frozen Polish lakes, secret bunkers, even abandoned breweries have all been searched. Every couple of years, somebody confidently announces a breakthrough. Every couple of years, the breakthrough turns out to be wrong. A fossilized forest worth around $500 million, gone like socks in a dryer. 2. A sacred gold-plated chest said to hold the 10 Commandments, allegedly built around 1300 BC under Moses himself. The Ark of the Covenant lived inside Solomon's temple in Jerusalem until the Babylonians sacked the city in 586 BC, and after that, the historical paper trail just stops cold. Some scholars suggest Babylonian soldiers carted it home as plunder. Others believe priests sealed it inside a hidden chamber beneath the Temple Mount. Ethiopian tradition holds that it has rested for centuries inside a chapel in Aksum, watched over by a single guardian monk who never leaves the grounds. No archaeologist has ever produced physical evidence. For more than 2,500 years, the most famous artifact in religious history has remained a complete blank space. 3. A katana so flawlessly forged that legends claimed it would refuse to serve anyone dishonorable. Yes, a self-righteous sword. The Honjo Masamune was crafted in the 1300s by Honjo Masamune, Japan's greatest smith of all time, and became the sacred symbol of the Tokugawa shoguns for 15 generations. Then, January 1946 happened. Japan surrendered all weapons under American occupation. The family handed over the blade, and the receipt listed the recipient as a U.S. sergeant named Coldy Bymore. Cute name. No matching American service record has ever been confirmed. Somebody mangled the spelling so badly that one of Japan's greatest cultural treasures vanished into pure paperwork chaos. Bureaucracy beats history again. 4. 137 carats of lemon yellow diamond, cut into a 9-sided double rose, rumored to bring bad luck to anyone who owned it. The Florentine Diamond bounced from Charles the Bold of Burgundy in the 1400s through the Medici family's jewelry box and finally onto the imperial crowns of the Habsburg dynasty for centuries. When the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed in 1918, the exiled royals smuggled it out in their luggage and into Switzerland. After that, the trail dissolves into a thick rumor stew, recut into smaller stones, pawned off in America, swiped by a sticky-fingered family advisor. Take your pick. One of the largest yellow diamonds ever cut, currently nowhere on Earth. 5. Ivan the Terrible, between mood swings and questionable life choices, somehow inherited a library so legendary it became a Russian national obsession. Known as the Liberia, it was said to contain ancient Greek manuscripts, Hebrew scrolls, and rare Byzantine texts smuggled out of Constantinople when the city fell in 1453. His grandmother, Sofia Palaiologina, hauled the entire collection to Moscow as a wedding dowry, easily the most extra dowry on record. Paranoid Ivan tucked it into a secret stone vault somewhere beneath the Kremlin, then died in 1584 without telling a single living soul where. Tsars dug, Soviets dug, scholars dug. Centuries later, the Liberia is still sealed somewhere beneath Moscow, if it ever existed at all. 6. Plundered Asian gold, rumored to be buried across 175 secret tunnel sites, all supposedly mapped by one Japanese general. Welcome to Yamashita's gold, the absolute Mount Olympus of treasure legends. According to the story, General Tomoyuki Yamashita oversaw the burial of looted wealth across the Philippines during World War II, including gem-stuffed Buddhas and stolen religious artifacts. Yamashita went silent forever in 1946. Rumors later tied portions of the hall to the Marcos regime, though firm proof has stayed irritatingly out of reach. Hunters since have burned through entire fortunes, ruined friendships, and chased decades of dead ends following maps that may be totally fabricated. Estimated value, if real, hundreds of billions of dollars. The Philippine jungle has never lost an argument. 7. King John of England, a king famous for bad judgment, worse luck, and losing things he probably should not have carried through a swamp, made a truly inspired decision in October 1216. He decided to drag his entire royal treasury through a marshy estuary called the Wash. The tide came in faster than the pack animals could waddle, wagons sank into the muck, and crowns, scepters, gold goblets, and ancient regalia inherited from Empress Matilda all sloshed into oblivion within minutes. John reportedly threw the medieval equivalent of a toddler meltdown and conveniently fell ill a few days later. 8 centuries on, the hall stays buried. The land has shifted so much, the loot might literally be under a turnip farm. 8. Just one panel. One stupid painted panel in the corner of the legendary Ghent altarpiece, missing since April 1934. The Just Judges was lifted from St. Bavo's Cathedral in Belgium by a stockbroker named Arsène Goudartier, who proceeded to send 13 taunting ransom notes before having the audacity to drop dead before revealing the location. His final whispered words referenced a place only I know, which is just spectacularly inconsiderate. Detectives have torn up cathedrals, gardens, sewers, and even the King of Belgium's palace. The panel currently displayed is a clever 1945 replica. The original might be sealed inside a Belgian wall, judging passersby in silence, for as long as bricks hold up. 9. A British sea captain, a cargo of solid gold Madonnas, and one extremely poor moral decision. That is the recipe behind the treasure of Lima. With rebel armies closing on Peru in 1820, Spanish authorities loaded the entire wealth of Lima's churches onto a trusted trader named Captain William Thompson, including 2 life-sized golden statues of the Virgin Mary. Thompson took one good look at all that glittering gold and decided trust was strictly for amateurs. He sailed to Cocos Island off Costa Rica, buried everything, and went full pirate cosplay. Captured shortly after, he escaped without revealing the location. Over 300 expeditions have searched. Cocos Island is now a protected national park, government code for please stop digging. 10. Behold the Flor de la Mar, a Portuguese carrack so absurdly weighed down with stolen Asian wealth that her captain allegedly warned the ship was dangerously overloaded. Nobody listened. Returning from the looting of the Sultanate of Malacca in November 1511, she carried diamonds, rubies, gold thrones, and the entire treasury of a wealthy empire, all crammed onto a vessel already wheezing in the water. A storm caught her off Sumatra, and the ship cracked apart in hours. Captain Afonso de Albuquerque survived clinging to a raft, looking like maritime history's worst logistics manager. Modern estimates put the value at $2.6 billion. The wreck is still lost somewhere in politically complicated waters. 11. 3 encrypted papers, 1 buried fortune, and 200 years of Americans developing carpal tunnel from coding. Welcome to the Beale Ciphers. In the 1820s, a mysterious traveler named Thomas J. Beale supposedly buried a haul of gold, silver, and jewels somewhere in Bedford County, Virginia, and left behind 3 coded documents describing the loot, the location, and the heirs. One paper got cracked using the Declaration of Independence as the key. The other 2 have resisted everything humanity has thrown at them, including supercomputers and very stubborn bored uncles. Some experts insist the whole thing is a 19th century hoax. Others have bankrupted themselves digging up Virginia farmland. Either way, the argument predates electricity. 12. A spooky pit on a Canadian island has been swallowing money since 1795. No questions asked. The Oak Island Money Pit was discovered when 3 teenagers spotted a strange depression in the ground and decided that was clearly normal. Down they dug, finding wooden platforms every 10 feet, layers of coconut fiber, charcoal, and a carved stone covered in symbols nobody could read. Theories about what lies at the bottom range from Captain Kidd's pirate hoard to the Holy Grail, to Marie Antoinette's smuggled jewels, to lost Knights Templar manuscripts, to Shakespeare's original plays. Why pick just one? 2 centuries of pumping, drilling, and television cameras later, the bottom remains a stubborn mystery. Maybe a sinkhole. Maybe history's longest prank. 13. A copper sheet covered in Hebrew letters, casually listing 64 stashes of ancient gold. Sounds invented, annoyingly real. The copper scroll was discovered in a cave at Qumran in 1952 alongside the Dead Sea Scrolls, and unlike its religious siblings, it is essentially a treasure inventory engraved on metal. Created around 50 to 100 AD, it details 64 hiding spots packed with gold, silver, and ritual items from the Second Temple in Jerusalem, totaling roughly 4,600 talents of precious metal. Theoretical value: potentially astronomical if the list was meant to be literal. The bigger problem is that the location clues reference landmarks that crumbled into dust 2,000 years ago. Scholars argue endlessly. The Judean desert offers no comment. 14. An ocean liner promised total safety by the Allies, with rumors of up to 40 tons of gold hidden below deck. The Awa Maru sailed in April 1945, carrying Red Cross supplies to Allied prisoners of war with guaranteed safe passage. On the return voyage, it was allegedly stuffed with platinum, diamonds, looted Asian artwork, plus crates of rubber and tin. A U.S. submarine accidentally struck the vessel in heavy fog in the Taiwan Strait, and the ship was lost. Salvage attempts in the 1970s and 1980s recovered some tin and personal items, but oddly, almost none of the alleged precious cargo. Either the manifest was wildly exaggerated for political reasons, or somebody quietly emptied the safe long before any salvage diver arrived. 15. An armored train allegedly stuffed with Nazi gold, sealed forever inside a Polish mountain. People are still hunting for this thing. As Soviet forces stormed into Lower Silesia in early 1945, German officers reportedly loaded a train with looted gold, jewels, paintings, and incriminating documents, drove it into a hidden tunnel near Walburzik, and bricked the entrance closed. In 2015, 2 amateur explorers swore they had located it using ground-penetrating radar, igniting a global treasure rush. Polish authorities investigated. They dug. No train, no tunnel, not even tracks. Skeptics declared the whole thing folklore. Believers insisted the Germans built decoy tunnels to hide the real one. The forest near Walburzik keeps its mouth firmly shut. 16. The most embarrassing royal heist in Irish history happened in July 1907, just days before King Edward VII was due to visit Dublin. The Irish crown jewels casually walked out of Dublin Castle. The thief simply opened the supposedly secure safe with a key, scooped up a massive diamond brooch, the Star of the Order of St. Patrick, and 5 gold collars worth £250,000 at the time, and strolled off whistling. Investigators pointed fingers at the flamboyant Ulster King of Arms, Arthur Vickers, but nobody was ever charged. King Edward reportedly went crimson with rage. The jewels never resurfaced, possibly broken up and pawned off piece by piece. Over a century later, the case remains officially open. 17. One galleon, a king's ransom in gold, and a sinking so catastrophic it shook European finance. The Merchant Royal went down off Cornwall in September 1641, possibly making her the richest English shipwreck ever lost. She was returning from the Spanish colonies of the Americas with 100,000 pounds of gold, 400 bars of Mexican silver, and 500,000 pieces of eight, much of it intended to pay a Habsburg garrison stationed in Antwerp. Modern value? Easily over $1 billion. Anchor finds in 2019 had treasure hunters absolutely vibrating with excitement, but the actual wreck has stayed hidden. Somewhere off Land's End, an entire payroll for a foreign army is napping under the seaweed, completely indifferent to inflation. 18. Out of 50 Imperial Fabergé eggs crafted for the Russian royal family between 1885 and 1917, 7 are still loose in the wild. After the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks ransacked imperial palaces and either sold these jeweled masterpieces or simply lost track of them like total amateurs. Each egg contained a tiny mechanical surprise. miniature golden carriages, mechanical singing birds, portraits that swung open. Basically, the world's fanciest snow globes. One missing egg, the third imperial, surfaced in 2012 at a Midwestern American flea market. A scrap metal dealer bought it for around $14,000, almost melted it down for the gold, then learned it was actually worth $33 million. The remaining 7 could still be sitting in attics under doilies right now. 19. An entire Inca gold convoy, allegedly hidden away in a remote mountain lake as a final act of defiance. When conquistador Francisco Pizarro detained Emperor Atahualpa in 1532, he demanded an entire room filled with gold as ransom. The Inca general Rumiñahui, sensing the Spanish were never going to honor the deal, allegedly diverted the second ransom caravan, hundreds of llamas absolutely loaded with gold and emeralds, deep into the Langanates Mountains of Ecuador, and tipped the entire haul into a hidden, mist-choked lake. Generations of explorers have braved those treacherous Andes peaks searching. Maps surface, fortunes evaporate, hopes dissolve in the fog. The Langanates are easily one of the most stubborn treasure holdouts on the planet. 20. Some of the most important fossils in human evolution were just lost in transit. Peking Man, a collection of Homo erectus bones around 750,000 years old, was discovered in China in the 1920s and represented a critical chunk of human ancestry. In 1941, with Japanese forces closing in, scientists carefully packed the fossils into 2 large crates and handed them off to U.S. Marines for shipment to America. The Marines were intercepted shortly after Pearl Harbor. The crates, vapor. Theories about their final resting place include a sunken cargo ship, a buried military camp, a private Japanese collector, and a forgotten warehouse in Tianjin. Plaster casts exist, thankfully, but the original fossils are still completely AWOL. 21. A jade stamp so powerful that whoever held it was officially the legitimate ruler of all China. Full stop, no questions asked. The heirloom seal of the realm was carved from a single sacred chunk of jade on the orders of Emperor Qin Shi Huang around 221 BC. It survived dynasty after dynasty for over 1,000 years, weathering wars, palace fires, coups, and one emperor who allegedly chipped a corner off during a wine-fueled tantrum. Then, around the 900s AD, during the chaos at the end of the Tang dynasty, it simply vanished from the historical record. Every Chinese ruler afterward technically governed without proper celestial paperwork. Replicas got carved, forgeries surfaced, but the original jade has been ghosting humanity for over a millennium. 22. A legendary royal staff used in the coronation tradition of French kings for centuries, until revolutionaries got bored. The scepter of Dagobert was crafted around 630 AD, topped with a tiny statue of King Dagobert I, and managed to survive Vikings, plagues, the 100 Years' War, and the entire Renaissance like an absolute champion. What it could not survive was the French Revolution. In 1795, the royal treasury at the Basilica of Saint-Denis was looted by revolutionaries with extremely strong opinions about monarchy, and the scepter was yanked off the inventory list and never seen again, almost certainly melted down for the gold within days. So a fragment of medieval France's most sacred regalia might be living its second life as someone's wedding ring. 23. The golden menorah from the Second Temple in Jerusalem was the spiritual centerpiece of an entire civilization, a giant 7-branched candelabrum of pure gold that stood for centuries inside the holiest room in Judaism. In 70 AD, Roman General Titus crushed Jerusalem and paraded the menorah through the streets of Rome as a war trophy. It's literally carved onto the Arch of Titus, still standing today like a stone receipt. After that triumphal parade, the menorah was probably stored in the Temple of Peace. Then Rome got sacked, repeatedly, by everybody. Visigoths, Vandals, take your pick. The menorah simply evaporates from history. Some claim it sits hidden inside the Vatican. The Vatican politely says, nope. 24. Genghis Khan, ruler of the largest contiguous empire in human history, was buried in 1227 with a treasure haul so legendary it makes pirate stashes look like loose change. The catch? Mongol burial tradition demanded absolute, ridiculous secrecy. According to the legend, the funeral procession traveled across the steppe, and every single person who saw it pass was sworn to silence. A river was diverted over the grave, herds of horses trampled the ground flat, and trees were replanted on top. 8 centuries later, archaeologists still cannot find the tomb. The Mongolian government technically discourages searching, citing ancestral respect. So somewhere under the endless grasslands sits the world's most successful hide-and-seek champion. 25. Montezuma's gold is the kind of treasure that has driven entire generations slightly insane. When conquistador Hernán Cortés strolled into the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan in 1519, he was showered with golden gifts so heavy they almost tipped his horse over. He greedily kept collecting, melting down sacred artifacts into ingots. Then in 1520 came the famous Sad Night, when the Aztecs revolted and the Spanish had to flee the city, carrying as much loot as their pockets could survive. Most of the gold reportedly sank into the canals or was hidden by Aztec priests in lakes, caves, and mountains across Mexico. Cortés spent years trying to force the location out of locals. He got nowhere fast. 26. Imagine an actual king who covered himself in gold dust and rode out onto a lake to wash it off as a religious offering. That king started one of history's most expensive myths. The legend of El Dorado, the Golden One, originated with the Muisca people of modern Colombia, who held coronation rituals at Lake Guatavita, where the new ruler tossed gold and emeralds into the water as gifts to the gods. The Spanish heard this story and immediately lost their minds. They tried to drain the entire lake with buckets in the 1500s, then with engineering canals in the 1800s. The British tried again with steam pumps. Lake Guatavita has been partially drained 4 separate times. Result? A handful of trinkets. The mountain just laughs. 27. Nadir Shah's peacock throne was the most expensive piece of furniture ever constructed by human hands. Crafted in 1635 for the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan, the same guy who built the Taj Mahal, it dripped with rubies, emeralds, pearls, and was topped with 2 life-sized golden peacocks. The original held both the Koh-i-Noor diamond and the Timur ruby. Then in 1739, Persian invader Nadir Shah sacked Delhi and hauled the throne back to Persia, like a particularly aggressive moving company. After Nadir Shah lost power in 1747, his empire collapsed and the throne was broken into pieces, looted, and scattered. The original is gone, the world's most blinged-out chair dismantled by chaos. 28. Sappho, the greatest poet of the ancient Greek world, wrote 9 entire books of lyric poetry that her contemporaries treated like sacred scripture. Around 600 BC, she was the rock star of the island of Lesbos. Plato called her the 10th Muse. Centuries later, libraries across the Mediterranean held complete sets of her works. Then time happened. Fires, earthquakes, religious censorship by medieval monks who found her romantic poems a bit too spicy, and just general civilizational chaos slowly chewed through every copy. Today, only 1 complete poem survives, plus a few fragments scribbled on torn papyrus or quoted by other authors. Tens of thousands of lines of genius, gone forever, victim of the worst archive management in history. 29. Tucker's Cross was a stunning emerald-studded gold crucifix recovered in 1955 from the Spanish galleon San Pedro, which sank off Bermuda in 1594. It was hailed as Bermuda's most valuable historical artifact and proudly displayed at the Bermuda Maritime Museum. Then, in 1975, just before Queen Elizabeth II was scheduled to view it in person, museum staff opened the display case and discovered, to their absolute horror, that the original had been swapped for a clearly amateur plastic replica. Somebody, at some unknown point, had quietly performed a heist so smooth nobody noticed. The original Tucker's Cross has never been recovered. Bermuda is still mildly embarrassed about it. The plastic version is now a tourist attraction in itself. 30. A grumpy German immigrant named Jacob Waltz claimed to know the location of a fabulously rich gold mine deep in the Superstition Mountains of Arizona. He refused to share the location with literally anyone for decades. On his deathbed in 1891, he allegedly mumbled a cryptic description involving a peaked hill, a stone face, and a hidden canyon. Then he passed away. The Lost Dutchman's gold mine has since lured generations of treasure hunters into dehydration, bad maps, cliff edges, and merciless desert heat. The Superstition Mountains are some of the most stubbornly hostile terrain in North America. The mine, if real, has hidden for over 130 years. Arizona keeps swallowing the optimists. 31. The tomb of Cleopatra, the most famous queen in history, is somehow completely missing. After her death in 30 BC, Cleopatra was reportedly buried alongside Mark Antony in a tomb she had prepared near Alexandria, Egypt. Ancient sources describe it as a grand monument near a temple of Isis. Then, Alexandria suffered earthquakes, tsunamis, rising sea levels, and the entire ancient harbor district slowly sank into the Mediterranean. Today, much of Cleopatra's Alexandria literally lies underwater, with archaeologists diving among submerged columns and statues. Some believe her tomb is at a site called Taposiris Magna, west of the city. Others think it's resting on the seafloor. 2,000 years later, the most powerful woman of antiquity still refuses to be found. 32. A lost golden city tucked somewhere in the Amazon, allegedly the final refuge of the Inca civilization. Paititi is the South American treasure legend that refuses to die. After the Spanish conquest of Peru in the 1500s, surviving Inca nobles supposedly fled eastward into the unmapped jungle, taking with them gold statues, royal records, and the last sacred objects of their empire. Spanish missionaries reported hearing stories about the city for centuries. Modern expeditions have searched the rainforests of Peru, Bolivia, and Brazil, and several have come back empty-handed and short on supplies. The jungle is dense, hostile, and full of things that bite. So far, Paititi remains exactly where the Inca wanted it, completely uninvited to the modern world. 33. The Library of Alexandria did not burn down in one dramatic Hollywood moment. The truth is somehow even worse. The library slowly bled scrolls for centuries due to fires, budget cuts, neglect, religious purges, and one infamous incident involving Julius Caesar accidentally setting part of the harbor on fire in 48 BC. By the time the Arab conquest arrived in 642 AD, the library had been essentially gutted for generations. Estimates suggest somewhere between 40,000 and 700,000 scrolls were ultimately lost, containing the collected knowledge of Greek, Egyptian, Babylonian, and Indian civilizations. Lost works by Aristotle, Sophocles, and Archimedes gone. Humanity has been intellectually limping ever since, just nobody talks about it loudly. 34. A Cossack hetman, a London bank, and one of the strangest treasure stories in Eastern European history. In the early 1700s, Hetman Pavlo Polubotok of Ukraine, anticipating trouble with Tsar Peter the Great, allegedly smuggled a massive quantity of gold to the Bank of England for safekeeping, on the condition it could only be claimed by his legitimate descendants. Polubotok died in prison in 1724. The gold supposedly sat in the vaults of London, gathering centuries of compound interest. Ukrainian families have been claiming it for over 300 years. The Bank of England politely insists no such deposit exists. Treasure historians are split between calling it a legend, a forgery, or the longest unpaid invoice in banking history. 35. Mansa Musa of the Mali Empire was so absurdly rich that during his pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, he handed out so much gold along the way that he accidentally crashed the economy of Egypt for over a decade. Yes, accidentally. His personal caravan reportedly carried 80 to 100 camels, each carrying around 300 pounds of pure gold dust. After his death, the Mali Empire slowly declined, and the legendary wealth stored in the royal treasuries of Timbuktu and Niani simply faded from records. No tomb of Mansa Musa has ever been confirmed. No central treasury has ever been excavated. The richest individual in human history left behind almost no physical trace. Africa's gold just walked off into the sand. 36. When the Knights Templar were arrested across France on Friday the 13th in 1307, King Philip IV expected to seize the most legendary treasure in medieval Europe. The Templars were the bankers of Christendom, holding gold, sacred relics, and the deposits of kings and pilgrims. What Philip actually found inside their fortresses was a horrible surprise. Almost nothing. The Templar fleet had reportedly sailed out of La Rochelle the night before the arrests. vanishing into the Atlantic with the bulk of the order's wealth. Theories about its destination include Scotland, Portugal, even Nova Scotia. Centuries of conspiracy theorists have linked it to the Holy Grail, the Ark, and Oak Island. The truth? Probably stashed quietly in friendly territory, never to resurface. 37. A wagon train of stolen Union gold, hidden in the Virginia woods during the American Civil War and never recovered. That's the legend of Mosby's treasure. Confederate cavalry raider John Mosby, nicknamed the Gray Ghost, supposedly captured a shipment of Union gold coins, jewelry, and silver heirlooms worth around $350,000 at the time during a raid in 1863. With Union forces hot on his heels, he allegedly buried the entire stash between two large pine trees somewhere near Culpeper, Virginia, planning to retrieve it later. The 7 Confederate soldiers tasked with hiding the treasure were captured before they could return. Mosby never found the spot again. The Virginia underbrush keeps the receipt. 38. The tomb of Alexander the Great should be one of the most visited archaeological sites on Earth. Instead, nobody can find it. After Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BC, his body was famously hijacked mid-funeral by his general Ptolemy and brought to Egypt, where it was eventually placed in a golden sarcophagus inside a grand mausoleum in Alexandria. Roman emperors made pilgrimages to visit the remains. Caligula stole the breastplate. Augustus accidentally bumped the nose off. Then around the 4th century AD, Alexandria suffered war, riots, earthquakes, and the tomb just dropped out of the historical record entirely. Over 140 official searches have failed. The most famous conqueror in human history is currently a missing person. 39. Frederick the Great of Prussia spent his entire reign accumulating a silver fortune to fund his many wars and his many flute concerts. By his death in 1786, the Prussian royal treasury contained massive quantities of silver bullion, ceremonial plate, and personal jewelry. Then came the Napoleonic Wars. As French armies marched on Berlin in 1806, Prussian officials hastily evacuated the treasury, scattering it across remote castles, abandoned mines, and forgotten vaults. Some was recovered, much was not. Generations of Prussian and later German searchers documented strange gaps in the inventories. After World War II, more of it disappeared during Soviet occupation. Today, untold quantities of Frederick's silver are still unaccounted for, hidden somewhere across the forests of eastern Germany and Poland. 40. The Three Brothers was the most famous jewel in Renaissance Europe. A brooch featuring 3 identical massive red spinels arranged around a glittering central diamond, with 3 pearls dangling beneath like very expensive earrings on the wrong body part. It was commissioned in the 1300s by the Duke of Burgundy, passed through royal hands across Europe, and eventually landed in the English crown jewels under Queen Elizabeth I. Then the English Civil War happened. Queen Henrietta Maria fled to the Netherlands in 1642 with the 3 brothers, desperately pawning royal jewels to fund her husband's losing army. The brooch was broken apart and sold off. Centuries later, individual stones may still exist, but the brooch itself is permanently extinct. 41. Captain William Kidd was a Scottish sea captain hired by the English government in 1695 to hunt pirates. He took the job and immediately started behaving suspiciously like a pirate himself. Before sailing back to face trial in 1699, Kidd reportedly buried a portion of his loot on Gardiner's Island near Long Island, which the English authorities later dug up and recovered. But Kidd hinted, both in letters and in courtroom testimony, that the rest of his treasure was hidden elsewhere, possibly on islands across the Caribbean, the coast of Vietnam, or near Madagascar. Kidd was executed in 1701 without revealing more. 3 centuries later, treasure hunters have searched dozens of islands. A few coins surface here and there. The bulk remains stubbornly missing. 42. The tomb of Queen Nefertiti, the most stunning royal face of ancient Egypt, is one of archaeology's biggest unsolved cases. She ruled alongside Pharaoh Akhenaten in the 1300s BC and is famous for the painted limestone bust that has stared serenely from the Berlin Museum for over a century. But her tomb has never been definitively identified. Some Egyptologists believe she was secretly buried inside the same complex as Tutankhamun, behind a hidden wall that scans in 2015 hinted might contain a sealed chamber. Follow-up scans gave mixed results. Egyptian authorities remain cautious. So somewhere beneath the sand of the Valley of the Kings, the most photographed queen of antiquity may be waiting to wave hello. 43. The Patiala necklace was, at the time of its creation in 1928, the most ridiculous piece of jewelry on Earth. Commissioned by Maharaja Bhupinder Singh of Patiala and crafted by Cartier, it contained 2,930 diamonds totaling nearly 1,000 carats, including the 7th largest diamond in the world as its centerpiece. The necklace was so over the top it had 5 rows of diamonds and looked like a chandelier had a baby with a wedding cake. Then, in 1948, the entire piece simply vanished from the Patiala royal treasury during the chaos of Indian independence. Cartier later recovered the empty frame in a London second-hand shop in 1998. The diamonds? Scattered, recut, lost across the global gem market. Reassembly is impossible. 44. Durandal was the legendary sword of the medieval French knight Roland, allegedly indestructible, blessed by an angel, and able to slice through solid rock. According to the old legend, Roland threw the sword from a mountaintop in 778 AD to keep it from enemy hands during the Battle of Roncevaux Pass, and it landed embedded in a cliff face at the village of Rocamadour in southern France, where it stayed for over 1,000 years as a tourist attraction. Then in June 2024, after centuries of just hanging in stone, somebody simply yanked it out and walked off with it. The French government considers it stolen national heritage. Whoever pulled the sword has not exactly come forward with proof of being a chosen one. 44 treasures, 0 recoveries, and an embarrassing stack of unanswered questions. But here's what should really bother you. This list barely scratches the surface. Which legendary missing treasure did we completely forget? Drop it in the comments and let the argument begin. Hit like if one of these blew your mind and subscribe so the next mystery doesn't slip past you.